Welcome back to the Weird Star Wars Characters Explained series, and really, what better time than the most wonderful time of the year to celebrate some more glup shittos. Though I'm a bit late in posting this in time for the actual Life Day, or for Christmas itself for that matter, December and the holidays overall always make me feel nostalgic for some Star Wars, with most of the newer movies having come out around Christmas time and Star Wars overall just being very nostalgic for me. This video will be a bit shorter than my other ones, but we're covering a cohort of characters that I think plenty of fans would be wanting to hear more about, all the Jedi from the prequel trilogy, at least all the ones that I haven't already covered in other videos. But every single named Jedi that appears on screen at any point in any of the three prequel films, and even a few outside of them, will have been covered by the end of this video. I can already hear the comments of people saying that Plo Koon and Ki-Adi-Mundi aren't actually glup shittos, and listen, I hear you, but the people who are so adamant that these guys aren't glup shittos are exactly the kind of people that are kind of being made fun of with the whole glup shitto joke. My dad has seen all of the Star Wars movies multiple times and grew up collecting Star Wars figures, but I would bet 100 Cold Hard Republic credits that he has no idea who Aayla Secura is. Plus, the title of these videos is technically Weird Star Wars Characters Explained, and all of these characters are deserving of having their lore explored, regardless of how many people consider them obscure enough to be a glup shitto or whatever. Also, I'll be playing some LEGO Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars footage in the background to keep things on theme. So whether you need to distract your baby cousins during a prolonged holiday visit, need something to watch on your flight back home, or you just need some nostalgic Star Wars trivia to help ring in the new year, then this video is for you. Plus, I'll be playing with the structure of this video a little bit. It'll be a bit more loose than some of my other iceberg videos. Things aren't really split up into tiers either. Overall, I just want to shake up my editing style a little bit and just get used to making different kinds of videos in general. But alright, without any more preamble, let's dive right into the Weird Star Wars Characters Holiday Special. So, the first batch of characters we're going to take a look at are a group of Jedi that were first introduced in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Fan-favorite Jedi Quinlan Vos was a near-human Kefar Jedi Master who played an instrumental role in the Clone Wars in both canon and Legends continuities. Originally just an unassuming background character with no Jedi backstory or importance whatsoever, appearing in Mos Espa in The Phantom Menace, the character was picked up and used by John Ostrander and Jan Duursema for the ongoing Republic comic series as well as the Star Wars Jedi series of one-shots. His appearance in The Phantom Menace, as far as I can tell, was never really explained beyond him being on some totally unrelated undercover mission, which makes it a mystery why he didn't help Qui-Gon and the others get off of Tatooine sooner. As explained in the comics and detailed in the new Essential Guide to Characters, Vos was born to Clan Vos, the ruling family on his homeworld of Kafoo, actually beginning his training on that planet instead of on Coruscant like most other Jedi of the time. After his aunt orchestrated the murder of his parents, Vos began training under a human Jedi Master named Tholm as his Padawan, though his parents' murder would set Vos down a lifelong path that often wandered dangerously close to the dark side. At the age of 11, Vos would save a Twi'lek toddler named Aayla Secura, discovering her Force sensitivity and eventually taking her on as his own Padawan, and the two remained close throughout their time serving in many of the galaxy's conflicts. As a central figure in the Republic comics, Vos became an important part of many pre-Clone Wars and Clone Wars battles, but I won't actually go into too great detail about them here since I haven't yet had the chance to read most of the Republic series, and I personally don't want to spoil myself on everything in there. Just know that a huge reason that a lot of people really love Quinlan Vos is that he was essentially the main character for what was basically the flagship Star Wars comic series while the prequel trilogy was coming out in the early 2000s. According to reference material, Vos would be at the Battle of Geonosis, just off screen, and declined leading clone troopers as a general in the war in favor of operating a spy network for the Republic. Vos would reappear in the 3D Clone Wars series, mainly just for the episode Hunt for Zero, where many of his traits from the comics were incorporated, such as his friendship with Obi-Wan Kenobi and his signature psychometry ability. This ability allowed Vos to see the past events or memories associated with certain objects, and use this ability to become an expert tracker and spy. This ability is considered quite rare in the galaxy, and only a few other Jedi like Cal Kestis and Rey Skywalker have been shown being able to use the ability with much talent or proficiency. In the Hunt for Zero episode, Vos and Kenobi would chase down Zero the Hutt to bring him to Republic justice, eventually tracking him to Teth where they would be confronted by Cad Bane together after Bane kills Zero. They didn't succeed in capturing Cad Bane though, and Vos has virtually no significant on-screen appearances beyond this in either continuity. Apparently he was supposed to appear in the show as early as Season 1 to accompany Jar Jar in the episode Bombad Jedi, but his character model couldn't be created in time. Vos was planned to be used later on in the Clone Wars show before it was cancelled, and unproduced episodes featuring Vos and Asajj Ventress were eventually adapted into the canon novel Dark Disciple, which is often considered one of the best novels in canon. The plot of this novel, as succinctly as I can put it, involves Vos tracking down Ventress at the behest of Kenobi and the Jedi Council to get her help in assassinating Count Dooku to end the Clone Wars. Vos and Ventress end up falling in love during their mission, but Vos ends up captured by Dooku, and for several months ends up as Dooku's agent, serving under the Separatists as the codenamed Admiral Enigma. Eventually reuniting with the Jedi, though continuing to deceive and sabotage them, Vos would end up crash landing on Christophsis, where Ventress would be killed by Dooku's Force Lightning, sacrificing herself to save Vos. Vos nearly killed Dooku in a fit of rage, but let him go, and would travel with Kenobi to Dathomir to lay Ventress's body to rest, redeemed in the eyes of the Jedi and continuing to serve them through the Clone Wars. This final scene of the book would be adapted for the beginning of the Tales of the Underworld show, half of which followed Ventress after she was resurrected shortly after she was left on Dathomir by Vos. In both continuities, Vos managed to stay with the Jedi through the end of the war, despite still getting dangerously close to the dark side on multiple occasions. Vos was originally slated to appear in Revenge of the Sith, where he would appear to die when his tank gets blown up by clones, and though an animatic of this scene exists, the scene never did make it into the final cut of the film. Due to this, Vos would end up surviving Order 66 as shown in the final few issues of the Republic comics, going into hiding on Kashyyyk after being badly hurt. The current canon basically agrees with these details, as the book Battles That Change the Galaxy places Vos at Kashyyyk after fighting on Boss Pity, as mentioned by Obi-Wan in Episode 3 before he goes to Utapau. Little is known about Vos's future after this in either continuity. In Legends, as shown in the Book of Sith reference book, Master Luke Skywalker would eventually become aware that Vos survived the Purge, even though the Empire thought that he had died. In canon, he was considered a target for the Inquisitorius as one of the few known remaining Jedi, and would end up working with the Hidden Path, an underground network helping Jedi and Force sensitives hide from the Empire. This Hidden Path would be used and referenced in many Empire-era stories, namely Star Wars Jedi Survivor and the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, in the latter of which Vos actually gets name-dropped by Kenobi when he sees Vos's name drawn on a wall that contains references to several other Legends Jedi. One other aspect of Vos's fate, perhaps one that many don't really know, is that Vos gave birth to a son less than a year after the rise of the Empire, as shown at the very end of the Republic series. Vos had this child with Colleen Hence, a former Separatist spy who fell in love with Vos during the Clone Wars. Apparently, she was technically made canon by her mention in a trading card of Vos that came out in 2019. Having gotten together with two formidable former Separatist agents, it shouldn't come to anyone's surprise that another reason lots of people love Quinlan Vos is simply his sheer animal magnetism. Master Plo Koon was a member of the Kel Dor species, which required distinct breath masks that helped them to survive both in oxygen-rich atmospheres and for brief periods in the vacuum of space, and were decorated with patterns unique to their clans on their homeworld of Doran. Not much is known about Plo Koon's early years, but according to legend stories, he was trained under the Wookiee Jedi Master Tyvaka and came from a family of Jedi. In fact, his niece Sha Koon would become a notable Jedi in her own right, surviving Order 66 before holding her own in a duel against Darth Vader, though she would die at the hands of the Dark Lord. After the death of Tyvaka during a botched negotiation with the Trade Federation, Plo Koon would fight in the ensuing Stark Hyperspace War alongside several other Jedi, and would be offered a seat on the Council following his instrumental role in securing victory for the Republic in that conflict. The Stark Hyperspace War was the key focus of issues 36 through 39 of the Republic comic series from 2001 to 2002, and was actually developed from a continuity discrepancy that came from Plo Koon himself, as in the Phantom Menace movie scrapbook, Plo Koon is said to be a veteran of the Hyperspace Wars, though by then, the only hyperspace war in Star Wars was the Great Hyperspace War, which took place 5,000 years before the films in the Tales of the Jedi comics. Though Plo Koon isn't that old, he is still thought to be quite old, as he's described as being 382 years old by the time of the Clone Wars. That is in Kel Dor years, so who knows how old he actually is in standard years. Plus, in the Stark Hyperspace War comics and the Jedi Power Battles game, Plo Koon is portrayed wielding an orange-bladed lightsaber instead of his usual blue one, but it's pretty normal for Jedi and many of these older Legends sources to be depicted with plenty of inconsistent lightsaber colors. Plo Koon is also shown in Jedi Power Battles to use the forbidden force power of Electric Judgment, which is supposedly a light side version of Force Lightning. Plo Koon would make appearances throughout the Republic comics and various other Legends comics and novels, but is mostly remembered for his prominence throughout the Clone Wars series. His frequent appearance in the series can be largely attributed it to showrunner Dave Filoni, who was a huge fan of the character before ever having worked on Star Wars officially, having worn a costume of the character to the premiere of Revenge of the Sith that appears to still be displayed in his office at Lucasfilm. In an interview, Henry Gilroy said that Lucas made fun of Filoni for liking Plo Koon so much, saying that only a diseased mind thinks Plo Koon is the best character. In that same interview, Filoni said that he pitched to Lucas an alternate version of Plo Koon's death scene that saw him survive by ejecting from his ship with a parachute, but Lucas said that he would have only made the scene longer by having Plo's parachute catch on fire before he landed on something sharp. Being a favorite character of the showrunner, Plo Koon would be given many different important roles. Being a favorite character of the showrunner, Plo Koon would be given many different important roles, such as being the one to have discovered show protagonist Ahsoka Tano as a toddler, and is shown as being very kind towards his clone allies, being well known for not believing them to be expendable. Plo Koon's clone troopers of the 104th Battalion, also known as the Wolf Pack, take their visual design and namesake from Filoni's love of wolves, which has become increasingly apparent in other Star Wars projects that bear his most direct influence. Plo Koon was even used in concept art for The Mandalorian Season 2, standing in for Luke Skywalker during his assault on Moff Gideon's cruiser, with a digital Plo Koon head even being placed on Luke's actor's head for the dailies so that Luke's appearance wouldn't be leaked during the production. Since his fiery death in his starship during Order 66 though, Plo Koon has not appeared chronologically after Revenge of the Sith. Plo Koon was portrayed in the films by actors Alan Rusco and Matt Sloan in the prequel trilogy, and was initially named after effects supervisor Nick Dudman's son, whose nickname was Plo Koon for some reason. One other peculiarity about Plo Koon's name is that he's referred to as Master Plo by characters such as Ahsoka in the Clone Wars instead of by his last name like most other Jedi Masters. Though I can't confirm this for sure, it's likely because his last name, when said in isolation, sounds an awful lot like a racial slur used for black people that dates back to the Jim Crow era. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi was a tall-headed Saurian Jedi Master who actually first appeared not in The Phantom Menace, but to the comic issue Prelude to Rebellion No. 0 in 1998, the first issue of the series that would eventually become known as Star Wars Republic. This series depicted Ki-Adi-Mundi as having multiple wives and children, which, along with countless other earlier Star Wars media, would eventually contradict how Attack of the Clones portrayed Jedi attitudes towards love and attachment. For Ki-Adi-Mundi specifically, it was eventually retconned that he got a special exception due to his Saurian species being endangered, which caused him to need to reproduce as much as possible. Personally, I like to think that this isn't even true, and Ki-Adi-Mundi just made up an excuse to do all of that. Also, and I'm recording this part during editing because I can't believe I forgot to include it, Ki-Adi-Mundi's entire family is said to have died off-screen during a battle on Saria later in the Clone Wars, and I'm not sure if this was done because Ki-Adi-Mundi's family became problematic for continuity, but if that is the reason, then that is a really extreme way of doing so, and makes the whole situation with Ki-Adi-Mundi having several wives just even funnier. Anyway, Ki-Adi-Mundi is a character that is surrounded with even more weird lore and behind-the-scenes details. For example, during the Battle of Geonosis, for a single shot, Mundi is seen wielding a green lightsaber, while immediately before and after in the same scene, his lightsaber blade is blue, and I imagine this led to the retcon of him being bonded with two different kyber crystals kept in the same hilt because of his dual Saurian brain. However, several other Jedi in Attack of the Clones and other media have this inconsistency of switching between lightsaber colors depending on the shot. In modern times, many Star Wars fans consider Ki-Adi-Mundi, with varying degrees of seriousness, to be a terrible Jedi and a prime example of the ignorance and hypocrisy that had weakened the Jedi Order to the point of collapse by the end of the Clone Wars. He refused to recognize the dangers of the Return of the Sith and the rise of Count Dooku multiple times, and is considered by some to be a war criminal because he authorized the use of flamethrowers on the Geonosians during the Second Battle of Geonosis. This negative opinion towards Mundi has led to some extremely funny YouTube thumbnails. Perhaps the biggest drama ever stirred up by Master Mundi, though, is his mere appearance on screen during the Acolyte series, a show that for this and other similar reasons received a lot of intense and, frankly, some ridiculous criticism for breaking the canon. Mundi's appearance in the show, which takes place in 132 BBY, makes him seem far older than many people had previously assumed, and definitely older than what his age was stated to be in Legends. Legends. However, his stated age of 60 by the time of The Phantom Menace came from the Episode 1 Insider's Guide, a CD-ROM released in June 1999 that is pretty obscure and contains other information that has since gone very outdated on other characters' birth dates and lightsaber colors, and it's not even canon anymore anyway. Heck, the same CD lists Mundy's lightsaber as being purple, which is doubly untrue and has never been portrayed as such in any media. Anyway, other people have gone into far greater detail than I'm interested in doing here into how Mundy's appearance in The Acolyte does nothing to break the canon, and how the intense backlash towards the show for Mundy's appearance specifically is completely absurd. In fact, his appearance in the show simply does more to solidify Mundy as a master ignorant to the rising threat of the Sith, which is overall a theme surrounding the Jedi that Lucas was very intentional about in the prequels. Also, this isn't to say that The Acolyte is perfect or exempt from criticism, but the fact that Ki-Adi-Mundi stirred the pot so much is reflective of how manufactured the more intense backlash to that show really was. Other than all that, beyond his appearances in the Clone Wars show and his death at the end of Revenge of the Sith, Ki-Adi-Mundi becomes pretty obscure in the timeline after this, though in the canon continuity, his lightsaber would eventually end up in the hands of Collector Dok-Ondar of Galaxy's Edge during the era of the First Order. Like all the other members of the Jedi Council by the time of Episode 1, Mundy plays a small role in the novel The Living Force by John Jackson Miller, where he's extremely adamant about ordering an ice mound, which is basically a snow cone, with no flavoring. A bizarre detail I'm sure many fans will use to further argue how sick and twisted Master Mundy really is. Mundy was originally designed by concept artist Ian McCaig, who created many of the other iconic character designs for the prequels, and was originally designed around the idea of unusual parodies of Obi-Wan's look from the original trilogy. He also had a design featuring an eye patch that went unused for Revenge of the Sith. In the films, he was portrayed by Silas Carson, who portrayed many other prequel characters in heavy makeup, such as Nute Gunray. Master Oppo Rancisis was a Jedi of the Serpentine Thespiasan species. Initially designed by storyboard artist Benton Ju, Rancisis was based on a picture of an old man in a Chinese calendar owned by Ju's grandparents. Legend sources such as the Power of the Jedi RPG sourcebook and an article from Star Wars Insider 62 explore Rancisis' backstory. He was offered to the Jedi Order by his mother, the Blood Monarch of Thespius, who ruled over the entire planet, with the hope that he would return to rule the planet one day with the experience of a Jedi. But when his sister was killed years into his training, Rancisis declined to return and rule his homeworld. Serving on the Council through to the Clone Wars, Rancisis was well renowned for his tactical strategic prowess, but was slow to renounce long-held traditions of the Jedi Order that were increasingly ignored or abandoned in the Order's later years. Though legend sources such as the New Essential Guide to Characters place his birth at 206 BBY, other stories such as Yaddle's Tale, The One Below, show him as having become a Jedi Master long before then, and canon stories set during the High Republic era show him having become a member of the Jedi High Council before 232 BBY. Around this time, Rancisis would supervise the establishment of a Jedi presence on the hidden planet of Tanalorr, but would abandon Tanalorr after an attack by Nihil raiders, an influential part of the fallen Jedi Dagan Gera's storyline in Jedi Survivor. Rancisis would appear in the Clone Wars 2D microseries, where he would oppose Anakin Skywalker's knighting at the onset of the Clone Wars on the grounds of tradition, as well as a few episodes of the Clone Wars 3D show, before dying in the 2005 Siege of Seleucami arc of the Republic comic series, which takes place shortly before Revenge of the Sith. In canon, however, Rancisis seems to have survived at least the initial Jedi Purge. Master Eeth Koth was a Zabrak Jedi Master from Iridonia who served on the Jedi High Council until sometime into the Clone Wars. When exactly Eeth Koth died has changed quite a bit throughout the years. In the reference book Inside the Worlds of Attack of the Clones, Koth is stated to have died when his gunship was shot down during the Battle of Geonosis, though this wasn't shown on screen in the film. Koth would later appear in the EU novel Wild Space, and would be brought back on screen for the 3D Clone Wars show, becoming a central character for the episode Grievous Intrigue. Though he was originally slated to die in that episode, he was kept alive as Dave Filoni deemed him interesting enough to use in the future, though he would only appear in very minor background roles for the rest of the series. Though he has no confirmed ultimate fate in Legends, canon stories have offered an explanation as to why he did not appear on the Jedi Council in Revenge of the Sith. For reasons unknown, Koth stepped down from the Council before the end of the Clone Wars and left the Order entirely, disappearing into obscurity, starting a family, and becoming a priest in the Church of the Ganthic Enlightenment. In 14 BBY, however, Darth Vader would appear mere minutes after his daughter's birth, engaging Koth in an intense lightsaber duel before killing him, as seen in the 2017 Darth Vader comic series. Vader would even take Koth's daughter to be raised in the dark side for Palpatine's Project Harvester, though her ultimate fate and whether or not she was used as a Force-sensitive tool for the Empire is unknown. Eeth Koth ultimately doesn't have very many appearances in Star Wars media, even compared to other background Jedi from the prequels, and this is exacerbated by the fact that at one point, Eeth Koth was essentially split into two different characters. Eeth Koth was portrayed by Kenyan actor Hassan Shapi, as shown in The Phantom Menace, with footage from that film being reused for his appearance in the Council in Attack of the Clones. When Koth was slated to appear during the Battle of Geonosis scenes filmed in Australia, local actor Tux Akindoyeni was used instead, whose appearance was so different from how Koth otherwise looked, even in the same film, that a new character, Agen Kolar, was created to resolve the discrepancy. Kolar fights in the Petranaki arena battle alongside his human Padawan Tan Yester, who dies during the battle. Kolar appeared in Revenge of the Sith instead of Koth, dying at the hands of Darth Sidious, and is even the one said to have taken Koth's seat on the Jedi Council, though during production of the two movies, Kolar was referred to internally as Eeth Koth. Agen Kolar even appeared in the Clone Wars micro-series with Eeth Koth's likeness, and sources conflict over which Zabrak Jedi actually does appear in that series, though the more recent 2009 databank entry confirms that this is in fact Eeth Koth. One other funny continuity bug related to Kolar is his lightsaber color, which is shown as green in all instances except Revenge of the Sith, where it's shown to have a blue blade. According to the reference book Lightsabers, A Guide to the Weapons of the Force, Agen Kolar installed his apprentice's blue lightsaber crystal into his own saber and could switch between the two, which is a touching tribute, though in the only image I can find of Tan Yester with his lightsaber drawn, Yester's blade is also green. Also in the Clone Wars micro-series, Agen Kolar / Eeth Koth is wielding a red lightsaber for some reason, which I'm just going to assume is dubious in terms of canonicity. Master Saesee Tiin was an Iktochi Jedi from the moon of Iktoch, who was one of the most skilled warriors and fighter pilots in the Jedi Order, though by nature he was extremely humble, introverted, and soft-spoken. As a youngling, Tiin was bullied for his advanced telepathic abilities, which were a hallmark of his species, and this likely influenced him not to take a Padawan for his own later in life. Having fought and flown valiantly in the Stark Hyperspace War and the Yinchori Uprising, Tiin was quite the experienced council member by the time that the Sith re-emerged in 32 BBY, and Tiin was one of the few on the council who took Qui-Gon Jinn's speculations about the Sith seriously. Tiin lent his flying skills to many major Clone Wars battles, including at Lola Sayu and Umbara, and late into the war, was part of the defense of Coruscant during its invasion by the Separatists, even taking control of a damaged Confederacy Star Destroyer with his clone troopers before it could crash into the planet. Sadly though, Tiin would be one of the very first Jedi to be slain by Palpatine, being one-shotted by Darth Sidious during Mace Windu's attempted arrest of the Chancellor. Tin's memory would live on though, as shown in Reign of the Empire Mask of Fear, a mourner on Jedha would grieve Tiin and mention him by name, overheard by Bail Organa. Tiin was played by 3 different actors in the movies: Khan Bonfils in Episode 1, Jesse Jensen in Episode 2, and Kenji Oates in Episode 3. Just popping in to share a couple more things that I found while editing. According to an August 2010 interview with Jesse Jensen, who portrayed Saesee Tiin in Attack of the Clones, Jensen is actually best known for being the production designer and producer for many early seasons of the Survivor show, and he also shared a story about making Ewan McGregor's kids cry when he was in costume when they came to visit their dad on set. He was also voiced by D. Bradley Baker in the Clone Wars 3D series. This design is cited as supposedly being early concept art for Saesee Tiin, though it looks considerably different from Tin's final design, and honestly looks a lot more like the Bendu from Star Wars Rebels. Master Depa Billaba was a human Jedi from Chalacta who served on the Jedi High Council as seen in The Phantom Menace. The character sported the actress's own facial jewelry, which was a good fit for the vision of the character, who was supposed to have the appearance of a spiritually enlightened figure. This would eventually tie into lore created for the Chalactans, who were initially cited in legends as being a separate near-human species that were considered very peaceful and spiritual. In the current canon though, the Chalactans are simply considered a group of humans from the planet Chalacta. Billaba doesn't have any speaking roles in the films and appeared in Episode 2 through reused footage, though like many of Episode 1's Jedi Masters, was also implemented into the battle at the Geonosian Arena. However, because the character intended to be Billaba wasn't played by the same actor, as was the case for Eeth Koth / Agen Kolar, a new character ended up being created, with this character becoming Depa Billaba's sister named Sar Labuda, who has little other backstory other than that she would die on Geonosis. According to the 2008 Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia, Billaba and her sister's parents were killed by by pirates when she was 6 months old, being incidentally rescued by Mace Windu, who would eventually go on to become Bilaba's Jedi Master, and would teach her to become one of the very few masters of the forbidden lightsaber form, Fapad, of Windu's own invention. Billaba would appear in various EU comics and novels, appearing in the Jedi Council Acts of War miniseries and early issues of the Republic comics. Her lightsaber appears totally different between which media she appears in. Her lightsaber is red in Jedi Council Acts of War, pink in the Republic comics, blue on her Episode 1 action figure, and green in the novel Shatterpoint, which details a conflict against the Separatists and an eternal war known as the Summertime War on Windu's homeworld of Harun Kal. Tormented by the atrocities committed on Harun Kal, Bilaba's sanity would deteriorate and she fell to the dark side. Though the darkness that influenced her eventually receded during a final confrontation with Windu, she attempted to take her own life and then fell into a coma, and as far as Legends is concerned, nothing else is known about her fate after this point. However, this plotline of her being in a coma would be picked up again for the backstory of Kanan Jarrus in Star Wars Rebels. As a Jedi youngling named Caleb Doom, Kanan would come across Master Billaba comatose in a bacta tank at the Jedi Temple, though in the new canon she was said to have been badly defeated by General Grievous. Taking an interest in the young Caleb when she awoke, she would take the boy as her Padawan and the two would form a close bond, even together stopping an attempted bombing at the Jedi Temple. As also shown in the Kanan comics, Billaba would be with her Padawan on Kolar when Order 66 was enacted, and she would lose her life buying her Padawan time to escape. Though there's some discrepancies on the details of the battle on Kolar between the comics and how it's shown in the Bad Batch show, in terms of Bilaba's death, there's not really any major differences. Adi Gallia was a Thalothian Jedi Master who would eventually serve on the Jedi Council by 22 BBY as shown in Attack of the Clones. Born to a family of upper-class Thalothian diplomats from Corellia and raised on Coruscant, Gallia was discovered by the Jedi when Master Ethan Piel intervened in an assassination attempt on her parents, according to the Republic comics. Becoming a master around 44 BBY, Gallia became a powerful diplomat for the Jedi Order, forming close ties with various senators and members of worlds outside the Republic. Fighting against the Yanchori Uprising before the Battle of Naboo, Gallia would also participate in various pre-Clone Wars conflicts, such as the foiling of the Red IRO terrorists on Lanik and the hunt for Aurra Sing after she killed 2 Jedi. As seen in the game Jedi Starfighter, she also participated in various starfighter battles with the Trade Federation immediately before the Clone Wars, as well as space battles on Geonosis at the outbreak of the war. For Clone Wars media, Gallia would be shown on the Council in the 2D series, but wouldn't be shown too much else until the Obsession comic, which takes place right before Revenge of the Sith, where she would die at the hands of General Grievous. Eventually, she would also be incorporated into the 3D Clone Wars series, where she would play key roles in the rescue of Eeth Koth from General Grievous and the rescue of the undercover Jedi team on Lola Sayu. Adi Gallia would then eventually go up against Darth Maul and his brother Savage Opress with Obi-Wan Kenobi, where she would be impaled with Opress's horns and die again. Yeah, this Obsession comic, even before the canon continuity reset, would be considered mostly non-canon due to the Clone Wars show for this and a number of other reasons. As I've alluded to a little bit, trying to reconcile the 3D Clone Wars series with earlier EU content set around the same time kind of just creates one big mess, and it's been quite the controversy for nearly 2 decades now. Like Eeth Koth and Depa Billaba, Adi Gallia was intended to reappear in Attack of the Clones for the arena battle, and footage of her performance by actress and model Jen Clark was used for the Council scenes in Episode 2. However, a new actress, Luli Nyamwasa, was cast for the arena battle scenes shot in Australia, so they eventually created a new character, Stass Ali, which they wrote in to be Adi Gallia's cousin. In fact, Ali was intended to appear in the Clone Wars at some point after Adi Gallia's death, but this never came to be. Nyamwasa would reprise her role for Revenge of the Sith, but wasn't available for reshoots, meaning that her appearance in the film, notably her death on Saleucami during Order 66, was ultimately replaced by 2 other actresses, though Nyamwasa's likeness would be the only one to represent the character for merchandise and promotional images. Other than a couple of missions detailed through HoloNewsNet articles, Master Ali has appeared little in expanded media other than being present for the attempted protection of Palpatine during the Separatist assault on Coruscant, as detailed in the novel Labyrinth of Evil. Adi Gallia would appear as a voice to Rey in The Rise of Skywalker, with her Clone Wars voice actress Angelique Perrin reprising the role, saying to Rey, "Rise, Rey." Perrin joked that she had initially gotten the role for the show by spending the night with Don Cheadle, by which she meant she spent a night watching the 2004 movie Hotel Rwanda featuring Don Cheadle, who used a South African accent, as her role for the Clone Wars required her to have a South African accent which she was unfamiliar speaking with. Moving on to the Jedi who debuted in Attack of the Clones, Kit Fisto was a member of the aquatic Nautolan species and is definitely one of the most recognizable of all the prequel Jedi. A skilled swordsman, Fisto is well known for his participation in key underwater battles during the Clone Wars, such as the Battle of Mon Cala shown in the 2D Clone Wars series and the other Battle of Mon Cala shown in the 3D series. In both battles, Kit Fisto used his Nautolan physiology to help lead the Republic to victory while awesomely shirtless. Fisto and his Mon Calamari apprentice, Nadar Veb, were the focus of the episode Lair of Grievous, where Veb would sadly be killed by Grievous. In the lesser-known story Tides of Terror, which appeared in issue 14 of the Star Wars Tales comic anthology series, which is not to be confused with the far more recent comic series also featuring Fisto titled Tides of Terror, Fisto teams up with Aayla Secura to solve the mystery of a nanovirus outbreak on Kamino by hunting down a traitor. Having been dunked into the ocean during the battle, Secura would be saved by Fisto, who kissed her to breathe for her and save her life, kindling a relationship that was supposedly always there between them, though as far as I can find was not really ever addressed again directly in another story, though in some other comics there's definitely some moments that suggest a certain closeness between them. Some of Kit Fisto's other bizarre claims to fame include being the second to last Jedi to die directly at the hands of Palpatine during his attempted arrest in Episode 3, managing to last a few seconds longer than Agen Kolar and Saesee Tiin, though he does last considerably longer in an extended but cut version of the scene, and if you look closely later on in the final version of the scene, his body isn't in full view in Palpatine's doorway, leading some to speculate in vain that he could have survived. He also looks vastly different between his appearances in episodes 2 and 3, looking apparently much more traumatized later in the war, which has led to numerous jokes. Kit Fisto originally came from one of many designs for a potential Sith character for Attack of the Clones, but was reworked into a softer Jedi design once Christopher Lee was cast for the role of the human Count Dooku. Kit Fisto was played by prolific voice actor Phil Lamar in the 3D Clone Wars series, who voiced the character with a Jamaican accent inspired by the voice of Fido Dido from the old 7-Up commercials. Kit Fisto was also played by Zachariah Jensen in Attack of the Clones, who is the brother of Saesee Tiin's actor Jesse Jensen. Master Aayla Secura was a Twi'lek Jedi who served with distinction as a Jedi General, leading the 327th Star Corps throughout the Clone Wars. She was portrayed by actress Amy Allen in the films and was voiced by Jennifer Hale for the 3D Clone Wars series, who has also voiced Bastila Shan, Satele Shan, and Rio Chuchi in other Star Wars media. She was portrayed in the Clone Wars with a French accent at the behest of Lucas to reference French resistance fighters from World War II, which likely influenced the decision for most Twi'leks native to Ryloth to have such accents in other media. Originally conceived to be a fish-like alien similar to Kit Fisto rather than a Twi'lek, Secura first appeared in Republic issue 19 as a vision of Quinlan Vos, but a later issue would show her backstory as having been saved as a toddler by an 11-year-old Vos from slavery and a Wampa on Ryloth. After this, she would join the Jedi and eventually become Vos's Padawan before ascending to the rank of Jedi Knight and then Master. Secura would end up participating in many of the Republic series' most prominent storylines, becoming a key character, so much so that George Lucas saw a particular painted cover for issue 33, and he decided that he wanted to have the character feature in the upcoming Episode 2 and eventually Episode 3, which is where most Star Wars fans likely know her from. She would also appear in many episodes of the 3D Clone Wars series, playing key roles in the Jedi Crash and Zillo Beast arcs. Her death scene on Felucia in Revenge of the Sith is quite well known, with her clone troopers continuing to shoot her over and over again even though she's already down. She's also somewhat notable for her choice of clothing, which is more revealing than basically any other Jedi from the prequel era, though this is attributed to her wanting her clothing to be more practical, supposedly. Though she hasn't gotten many more notable appearances outside of Clone Wars era media and some flashbacks in the 2020 Marvel flagship comic series, Jennifer Hale would return to briefly voice the character for The Rise of Skywalker when the voices of past Jedi speak to Rey, being the one to say, "Let it guide you," referring to the Force. Master Luminara Unduli was a Mirialan and one of the foremost Jedi of the Clone Wars era. Briefly appearing in the 2001 novel Cloak of Deception, she played a major role in The Approaching Storm, a 2002 novel which detailed the border dispute on Ancion mentioned at the beginning of Attack of the Clones, and she would make her on-screen debut in that same scene in Palpatine's office at the beginning of the film. Taking on another Mirialan as her Padawan, Barriss Offee, the two participated in the Battle of Geonosis and several later Clone Wars battles. Unduli helped Ahsoka Tano fight Ventress aboard the Tranquility Tranquility Star Destroyer in the Clone Wars episode Cloak of Darkness, and helped supervise the second Battle of Geonosis, where Ahsoka and Barriss would sabotage a secret underground separatist tank factory, trapping themselves inside, though they would be found alive later by their masters. Shortly after, Barriss would end up temporarily possessed by Geonosian brainworms the Jedi had carried with them from the battle, but Ahsoka was able to save her friend and the rest of the station. In terms of both Legends and canon sources, Luminara doesn't participate in too many other notable battles, though she does get trapped on Ilum with Barriss and rescued by Yoda in the 2D Clone Wars series. Her final significant battle would be the Battle of Kashyyyk, as shown in Revenge of the Sith, where she was killed by clones enacting Order 66, as shown in the Republic comics. In canon, however, Luminara would survive for a short while after being captured on Kashyyyk and taken into Imperial custody on Stygeon Prime before being executed by the Grand Inquisitor. Her body, though, was still stored on Stygeon Prime and was used to lure Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger there in the Rebels episode Rise of the Old Masters, but as they find out, by then Luminara had been long gone. In Legends, Barriss was the focus of two novels known as the Medstar duology, where she used her talent of force healing on the front lines of battles on worlds such as Drongar, battling separatists, and the Black Sun. Barriss was shown to have died during Order 66 in the Legends continuity, being shot by a Republic tank on Felucia, but in the new canon, her ultimate fate was unknown and widely speculated about until relatively recently. But to give some background, her characterization in the Clone Wars show had taken a sharp turn from her appearances in other media, as she bombed the Jedi Temple after being disillusioned with the Jedi Order and the Clone Wars, blaming the bombing on her friend Ahsoka, but ultimately confessing to the crime. After this, her fate after Order 66 was unknown for years, with many speculating that she could be the mysterious Inquisitor that fights Ahsoka in the Ahsoka series. Ultimately, she was revealed in Tales of the Empire to have been taken from Republic military prison to become a candidate for the Inquisitorius, killing a fellow former Jedi and becoming a full-fledged Inquisitor before going on the run. She would use her time in exile to become a wandering healer, which appears to have accelerated her aging, ultimately being found by other Inquisitor fourth sister, who she convinced to also turn her back on the Empire. Luminara was played by actress Mary Oyaya in episodes 2 and 3, and voiced by Cree Summer in the Clone Wars 2D series. In the 3D show, she was voiced by Olivia Dabo, who also reprised her role in The Rise of Skywalker to tell Rey. Barriss was played by Nalini Krishan in Episode 2 and deleted scenes from Episode 3, and voiced by Meredith Salinger in The Clone Wars and Tales of the Empire. Many have speculated that the friendship between Ahsoka and Barriss had a romantic undertone, and Giancarlo Volpe, director of the Clone Wars episode Weapons Factory, in which they spend a lot of time together, said that he was secretly pushing for the two to have that kind of relationship behind the scenes, especially after Barriss's betrayal to the Jedi in the bombing arc. The potential for this to happen now is slim to none. Also, many fans have speculated that Luminara and Barriss take design cues from Muslim culture and clothing, which creates unfortunate implications considering Barriss committed a terrorist attack on a major building using explosives. Pablo-Jill was a Jedi Knight of the aquatic and frankly somewhat terrifying Ongri species from the Scustal cluster, famous among the Jedi for temporarily instilling peace on the world of Ord Mantell. In Attack of the Clones, he can be seen briefly walking through the Jedi Temple, and later in the movie participating in the arena battle on Geonosis. Despite being highly regarded within the Order, he isn't cited as having participated in any major battles of the Clone Wars between Geonosis and Coruscant, though he would be one of the many Jedi cited in Labyrinth of Evil as being present to try and defend Chancellor Palpatine from General Grievous. Though Grievous considered him a skilled warrior, more so than most of the others present with Palpatine, Grievous still killed him and took his lightsaber for his collection, and reference materials point to Pablo-Jill's lightsaber being one of the ones that Grievous uses in Revenge of the Sith. In canon, however, Pablo-Jill was actually disarmed by Grievous during a battle in a satellite city over the planet Duro earlier in the war, and would live on. Pablo-Jill was also slated to appear in Revenge of the Sith. He was a completely CGI character in Attack of the Clones, but for his scenes in Episode 3, his model needed to be redone to appear in more detail, which ultimately caused the creation of an all-new model with enough visual differences to be considered a new character, just like many of the new Jedi characters that had to be created due to different appearances of real actors between Episodes 1 and 2. Thus, Coleman Kcaj was born, named after the son Jack Coleman of Robert Coleman, one of the VFX supervisors. If that name sounds familiar, it's because Coleman Trebor was named in the exact same way after Robert Coleman himself. Similarly, Pablo-Jill had been named after Pablo Hellman and Jill Brooks, two other members of the VFX team for Attack of the Clones. Coleman Kcaj's main claims to fame are being on the Jedi Council at the end of the Clone Wars, being seen briefly in both Episode 3 and a few episodes of the Clone Wars, and being seen talking to Verk Senator Sweet Conquerkill shortly before the showing of Squid Lake, attended by both Chancellor Palpatine and Anakin Skywalker. In fact, Coleman Kcaj was identified in some production material as Sweet Conquerkill before this name was ultimately given to this senator. In Legends, Master Kcaj was never confirmed to have been killed during Order 66. His fate seemed to be sealed, though, when in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, an Angry Jedi was one of many bodies frozen in amber in the Jedi tomb underneath the Fortress Inquisitorius. Though this Jedi was identified as Coleman Kcaj in the initial version of the episode guide on StarWars.com, concept art from the show identified the Jedi as Pablo-Jill. Pablo Hidalgo would assert that the Jedi in Obi-Wan Kenobi appeared closer to Pablo-Jill, and eventually StarWars.com updated their guide to say that Pablo-Jill was the one to have been killed by the Inquisitors. Personally, I think that Coleman Kcaj being in the tomb makes more sense in terms of what we know about both characters from Legends, but it's not like the newer shows need to adhere to Legends lore anyway. Jocasta Nu is the chief librarian of the Jedi archives during the twilight years of the Republic and the Jedi Order. Played by the late Australian actress and comedian Aletha McGrath, Jocasta most prominently appears in Attack of the Clones when Obi-Wan Kenobi seeks her help in locating the planet Kamino, where she's pretty confident that the planet doesn't exist if it isn't in the Jedi archives. Despite her apparent ignorance and arrogance in this scene, Master Nu's legacy before and after the Clone Wars is extensive. She was on the Jedi Council for some time before fully committing herself to the archives and fully trained many Padawans, though the violent Clone Wars didn't really see her on the front lines, with her being briefly incapacitated and her identity stolen by a shapeshifter in the episode Holocron Heist of the 3D show. She and her team of librarians would defend the Jedi archives to the bitter end at the end of the war. In Legends, as shown in the comic Purge: Seconds to Die, but primarily through the Revenge of the Sith video game, Jocasta Nu would be murdered by Darth Vader during Operation Nightfall when the newly christened Vader stormed the Jedi Temple with the 501st. In the new canon, however, Master Nu would survive the end of the Clone Wars, where she would go into hiding and try and gather as many materials as she could to preserve the Jedi's legacy, and Sidious considered her highly dangerous. Shortly after Order 66, she would sneak back into the temple and try and steal a holocron from the archives, which contained a list of known Force-sensitive children. Once there, she would attack the Grand Inquisitor, whom she hated for disrespecting the knowledge of the archives, and she was defeated by the Grand Inquisitor, only to be saved by Vader, who wanted Jocasta alive. Jocasta would elude Vader, managing to erase the entire Jedi archives in her escape, even learning of Vader's true identity, and would engage Vader in an epic battle where she utilized a lightsaber rifle, a specialized weapon that used a lightsaber as fuel for a few very powerful plasma blasts. Ultimately, Vader would kill her, though Vader would also destroy the memory chip holding the data concerning the Force-sensitive children that she was after, as Vader didn't want any competition for his own role serving alongside the Emperor. This is all from the 2017 Vader comics, by the way, which you should totally read if you haven't already. All awesome stuff. Though Master Jocasta Nu would die so soon after the Clone Wars, her efforts to restore the Jedi would have echoes for years to come, as one of her holocrons and eventually her entire cache of Jedi relics would eventually be found by Luke Skywalker. Bultar Swan was a human Jedi born on Kuat who can be very briefly seen during the Battle of Geonosis. Surprisingly, she has actually quite a few Legends comics appearances for being so obscure in the actual film that she appears in. Swan was skilled in martial arts and was the Padawan of Master Micah Giet, but trained under Plo Koon after Giet was killed in 33 BBY during the Yanchori Uprising portrayed in Jedi Council Acts of War. She joined other Jedi such as Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Anakin Skywalker on a mission to Fondor and its moon Nalastia, as shown in Scholastic's Star Wars Adventures Young Reader series, where Swan helped foil a plot by Grudo the Hutt to destroy the Fondor shipyards. Swan would survive the Battle of Geonosis after fighting inside the arena, and became a general in the war shortly afterwards, participating in battles on Amaltana and Argonar, as shown in Clone Wars Adventures 7 and Republic issue number 59, respectively. As shown in the Purge comic miniseries, Swan was operating out of a Republic med center during the outbreak of Order 66 and managed to survive the initial Purge. She was one of the Jedi called by Master Shadei Potkin in order to organize Jedi survivors to fight against the Sith, and reunited with those Jedi on Kessel, where they were nevertheless found by Vader, who killed many of them before being amputated in an ambush by Swan and Master Su Choi. Though Master Choi ordered Swan to kill Vader, she couldn't bring herself to kill an unarmed opponent, which prompted Master Kofi Arana to stab her before falling to Vader immediately afterwards. Swan would sadly die, and Vader would claim her lightsaber to kill the remaining Jedi. Swan was played in Attack of the Clones by Australian actress Mimi Darafet and was based on concept art by artist Dermot Power. Though Darafet underwent makeup and wardrobe tests for Revenge of the Sith, according to set diaries for the film, she never ended up in that film's final script. As our second to last entry, we are going to do a lightning round to briefly cover every other Jedi that has appeared on screen in any of the prequel movies that I haven't already covered in this video or previous ones, regardless if they have only screen time measuring in the fractions of seconds. Almost all of these characters are ones that appeared during the Battle of Geonosis as part of Mace Windu's strike team in the Petronaki Arena. Ekim Rieli was a human Jedi Master who can be seen kicking a battle droid during the Battle of Geonosis. Raeli's Padawan, Loomis Atima, was also at the battle, but would be later confirmed to have died. Raeli would appear in the short story Hammer, featured in the 147th issue of Star Wars Insider, which revealed that Raeli was traumatized by Geonosis and was reassigned as a Jedi archaeologist for the remainder of the war. He would be sent to Nikt Ka, a planet on the edges of the ancient Sith Empire near the end of the Clone Wars. The planet harbored an ancient suit of Sith armor from the ancient Beast Wars of Onderon, and a pilot accompanying Raeli would don the suit and become corrupted by it, dueling Raeli and eventually defeating and beheading him. Fi X Search was a Nikto Jedi who fought at Geonosis. Very little is known about him other than that he likely died at the battle, and his name wasn't confirmed until 2011 by an action figure. Kot Kyn and Bardan Jace were two humans who formed a master and apprentice duo, and both fought at Geonosis. Very little is known about them from legend sources, but they can be seen in the first issue of the 2017 comic miniseries Darth Maul, where they detect Maul's presence while patrolling the underlevels of Coruscant, feeling cold when Maul walks by disguised. Joklad Danva was a human Jedi Master who fought and died at Geonosis, portrayed by Kyle Rowling, who was part of Nick Gillard's stunt team for the film and one of the dueling and stunt doubles for Christopher Lee as Count Dooku. As such, Danva was described in HoloNet news articles as a martial arts and lightsaber combat master, being proficient in Teräs Käsi and Form 6 of lightsaber dueling. In fact, he was so powerful that he cut himself off from the Force temporarily during Teräs Käsi matches, as he didn't want to give himself an unfair advantage against opponents. This female human Jedi with a wacky haircut is named Sarissa Jang. She can be seen shouting while cutting down a Geonosian during the battle, and can be seen lying dead in a deleted scene for Attack of the Clones, with her death later being confirmed in her Legends databank entry. Before her death, she is described in HoloNet News as having participated in a hostage rescue on the world of Adsari involving a Gotal emissary. Though the Jedi got the emissary to safety, Jang and her fellow Jedi would be criticized by Gotal Foreign Affairs Commune leader Shagrat Losed for meddling in an internal Gotal affair. Jang was played in Episode 2 by Australian martial arts enthusiast Karen Wilson. Nikanis Tasu and Sefjet Josal were two human male Jedi Knights who fought at Geonosis. They are responsible for providing Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker with two spare lightsabers so that they could better fight in the battle, and they would take these sabers to battle Count Dooku later in the movie. The two were played by Nick Anastaso, a visual effects editor, and Joseph Jet Sally, an assistant editor, respectively. Nikanis Tasu has been speculated in the past to be the true identity or basis for Jedi Bob, and was notable for his force jumping abilities according to a trading card in Star Wars Force Collection. K. Mars Redath Gom was a Weequay Jedi who fought at Geonosis. According to the New Essential Guide to Alien Species and a 2013 Topps trading card, he's described as having been born away from the Weequay homeworld of Srilur, foregoing the ritual of using Quay totems to dictate his fate as interpreted from the will of the Weequay patron god, Quay. As such, he was allowed to join the Jedi Order, which did not have many Weequay within their ranks. Sadly, he was killed at Geonosis, and wasn't very well regarded at his homeworld for breaking with Weequay tradition. Ichitan Mikoda was a human Jedi who can be barely seen for about a second and a half in the distant background behind Obi-Wan Kenobi on Geonosis. He was played by extra Mark Wendt, who wrote an extensive article talking about his experience being on set for Attack of the Clones, where he describes not knowing if he made the cut in the final film for months, and just barely being able to make out his performance after about an hour of searching on the film's DVD, eventually discovering that he had been composited into a scene behind Ewan McGregor. He also has a bit of a backstory from the Holocron, which portrays him as a Jedi consular who worked with the Republic Diplomatic Corps, but had an unorthodox fighting style only really suited to swift victories, leading him to be unsuited for the prolonged Battle of Geonosis and dying in the arena. Roth Del Mesona was a human Jedi Master who fought at Geonosis, leading a group of clone troopers during the ground engagement and surviving the battle. Mesona is featured in a Labyrinth of Evil, although wasn't positively named and identified until later, and in the book he would die defending Chancellor Palpatine from General Grievous during Palpatine's kidnapping at the Battle of Coruscant. Tardos Gon was a Klatooinian Jedi Knight who fought at Geonosis. Like fellow Jedi Eeth Koth and Sora Bulq, Gon was said to have died when his gunship was hit by enemy fire. While Eeth Koth and Sora Bulq were retconned into surviving this downed gunship and appearing later, Gon was not so lucky and is still considered to have died at Geonosis. Rowan Shrin was a human Jedi Master from Aweta. During the Battle of Geonosis, he would witness the deaths of not only his master Nat Sim, but also his first Padawan, and his second Padawan would die on Minari shortly before the end of the Clone Wars. Being a major character in the Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, Shrin would be a part of a Jedi team at the Battle of Murkana during the formation of the Empire, escaping the initial purge but eventually being killed by Darth Vader, but not before Vader told Shrin of his previous identity as Skywalker in an attempt to break his spirit. This didn't work, however, and Shrin died with faith that despite the Empire's rise, the Force would never die. Shrin supposedly appeared in Attack of the Clones, with his name being retroactively applied to a Jedi that did appear in the film, but I can't seem to find any pictures or footage of him from the actual film, only really finding a still from what I'm pretty sure is a Star Wars Insider article. Many people also attribute this image to Shrin's master, Nat Sim, but this doesn't seem to be corroborated by any official source. These next few Jedi that I'm about to cover did appear in Attack of the Clones, but not during the Battle at Geonosis, as they were only younglings at the time. The group of younglings that Yoda is seen teaching when Obi-Wan Kenobi seeks his advice about the missing planet Kamino is called the Bear Clan for their foreseen courage and bravery. For some added context, Jedi younglings, according to the lore surrounding this clan, were generally sorted into clans based on attributes that were foreseen to manifest later in life when Jedi Masters looked into their futures. The title also implies the existence of creatures called bears in Star Wars, of which there were apparently many kinds by the release of Attack of the Clones, and probably shouldn't be all that surprising considering the existence of things like Womp Rats, Tuca Cats, and Loth Wolves in Star Wars. Members of the Bear Clan include Liam, the only one named in the film itself, as Yoda tells him to dim the shades.
Liam, the shades.
His name was actually a direct reference to Liam Neeson, as told in the film's DVD commentary. The other most notable member is Ashla, a young female Togruta. She shares a name with the ancient title for the light side of the Force, or the Force itself, and has been believed by many to have been a younger Ahsoka Tano, and this connection was considered at one point during the production of the Clone Wars show, but the idea was scrapped as the ages didn't really line up. This little Nikto Chud is named Chian, this little Whippet is named Jemp, and this human girl, played by Phoebe Yamkiadi, is named Mari Amethyst, and another human boy named J.K. Bertola, portrayed by Alex Knoll, is the one to answer Obi-Wan's question finally, suggesting that someone erased the planet from the archive's memory. In the film's script, Mari was originally going to also suggest that the planet's gravity would go away if the planet had been blown up, but this did not make it into the film's final cut. So as the end of this lightning round, I also want to cover a few Jedi from the 2D Clone Wars series. I just recently watched it to prepare for this video, and also just because I felt like rewatching it because it's great, and a few of the Jedi in there stuck out to me this time. There are a couple Jedi exclusive to the show, like Dockman Barek and Tar Sayre, who appear briefly in the show but aren't quite as interesting as three others. These three are Vulvif Mon, Foul Modama, and Roron Karab. These three originated from a contest where fans of the show could vote on which one, all based on aliens seen in the Mos Eisley Cantina in A New Hope, would appear in the show. Vulvif, the wolf-like Shistavanin Jedi, would win the contest and appear in Chapter 20, though the other two would make it into the show eventually as well. According to Vulvif's databank, he was found orphaned on the desolate world of Uven Prime and trained by Master Pauish Radul, and often isolated himself away from other Jedi, though he would eventually fight by their side as seen during the Battle of Munilinst. One of the others, Foul Modama, was a Tals from Alzok 3, and is one of the main Jedi part of the team that tried to protect Palpatine from Grievous during the invasion of Coruscant, even at one point carrying the Chancellor in his arms. The backstory of the Tals species, which claimed that they weren't discovered by the galaxy at large until the reign of the Empire, initially made the presence of a Tals Jedi during the Clone Wars pretty confusing, so Modama's databank simply said that his origins were mysterious and nobody really knew where he came from, though the Tals species would eventually be introduced again in the 3D Clone Wars series. Also, according to the show's DVD commentary, his name was inspired by a Middle Eastern fava bean dish of a similar name. Roron Karab was an Ithorian Jedi who similarly appeared in the Clone Wars show defending Palpatine, where he can be seen unleashing a powerful Force scream with his four powerful Ithorian throats. Roron Karab was named after Ron Cobb, the concept artist who designed the Ithorian species for A New Hope. Sadly, both Mudama and Karab were killed by Grievous during his assault, and both of their lightsabers would be taken by Grievous. According to the reference book Lightsabers, A Guide to Weapons of the Force, and its updated canon version, Karab's lightsaber is one of the ones Grievous kept with him during his final fight against Obi-Wan Kenobi, and thanks to this book, Roron Karab is included in the newer canon and has a pretty nice live-action style render. The exact Jedi that accompany Palpatine during the assault on Coruscant are different depending on the version of the event seen in either the Clone Wars micro-series or the novel Labyrinth of Evil, though Karab and Modama are shown in both of them, even though Modama is not explicitly mentioned by name in the novel. For our final entry today, we're going to take a look at Master Sora Bulq, who was a weak-way Jedi and, like many of the other Jedi in this video, appeared on screen for the first time during the Battle of Geonosis as seen in Attack of the Clones. He was one of the Order's best lightsaber wielders, having mastered all of the Order's lightsaber forms, even Form 7, Vapad, which brought the user dangerously close to the dark side, though he would teach this form to many, such as Quinlan Vos. Though the Inside the Worlds reference book for the film would claim that Bulq had died at Geonosis alongside Eeth Koth, the character would be featured in the Jedi Mace Windu comic, where he's revealed to be a dissident Jedi who leads a schism within the Order of those who refuse to serve as generals in the Republic's Grand Army. Though later he would be revealed to be a full-blown Dark Jedi and lead with Count Dooku, convinced that the Jedi had to change for the Republic to become more just. After trying to lure Windu and other Jedi to his home estate to have Asajj Ventress kill them all, his secret new allegiance was exposed, making him one of the Clone Wars' most high-profile traitors, with Quinlan Vos even believing him to have been the Sith apprentice of Count Dooku. Bulq would continue to feature in Clone Wars era comics such as the Trackdown and Siege of Seleucami arcs of the Republic series, the latter of which would see him kill Master Oppo Rancisis before finally being struck down by Quinlan Vos. Though this marked the end of Bulq's story chronologically, he would go on to appear in the Clone Wars 3D series in 3 episodes. Bulq, like many characters featured in many different Clone Wars era media, is subject to many different continuity contradictions of varying severity, including a complicated timeline of when exactly he left the Jedi Order and joined Dooku, but his appearance in the episodes Sabotage and the Jedi Who Knew Too Much took place far after he was supposed to have become an enemy of the Jedi. However, to be fair, he's only confirmed by name to have appeared in Grievous Intrigue, which takes place earlier in the war, and his other 2 appearances among other Jedi could conceivably be explained as being a different weak-way Jedi with the same character model, though there are not very many weak-way Jedi in the first place. However, ultimately, this minor potential inconsistency surrounding a single Jedi is basically just a flimsy band-aid on the giant gaping wound that is expanded universe Clone Wars canon. Don't even get me started on Ventress's timeline of events. Anyway, these and other canon kerfuffles surrounding Sora Bulq were never fully resolved before the canon reset, and in the new canon, Sora Bulq is simply a background Jedi that appears in Episode 2 and a few episodes of the Clone Wars, with no mention about his turn to the dark side in other stories. And that is the end of the Weird Star Wars Characters Holiday Special. This video was actually originally going to be a lot longer, but I wanted to get it out before Christmas, and I couldn't even manage to do that, so I ended up restricting it to just the prequel-era Jedi characters. Originally, this video was going to be all about all of the characters that I had missed that people had requested I cover in the comments to all of my previous videos, but that probably would have resulted in another video in the zone of 3 hours or so, and I just don't feel like making a video that long right now. But that just leaves me with another video I'll be able to do sometime in 2026. Maybe I'll actually make a video in time to post it for May 4th this year. But yeah, I don't have too much to announce right now in terms of future projects. I'm going to keep making videos, but I cannot promise a timetable on when those might come. I've got plans, but I don't want to announce anything for sure just yet. Definitely a few bigger videos coming at some point for sure, and I finally want to get around to putting some more Star Wars Legends reviews on my second channel, so if you're interested in that, go check out my other channel. I even have the idea that I might start streaming once I get around to covering Knights of the Old Republic, so who knows. Anyway, I hope all of you watching have a wonderful remainder of your holiday season and a wonderful new year, and going into the new year, as always, may the Force be with you.